Frozen Bear begs man to enter the house. On a cold winter's night, Ethan spotted a huge, dark figure struggling through the snow toward his cabin. What's a bear doing out in this storm? He wondered, peering through the window. It was the dead of winter. Any sensible bear would be hibernating, not trudging up to a human's home, especially not in such harsh weather. As he watched, the bear did something completely unexpected. It looked straight at him, and with a clear gesture of its paw, seemed to be beckoning him outside. No way, Ethan muttered to himself, a mix of disbelief and curiosity stirring within him. The bear's eyes held a desperate, almost human plea for help that was hard to ignore. Shaking his head in wonder, Ethan bundled up in his warmest coat and boots, took a deep breath, and opened the door. The cold hit him like a wall, but there was the bear, looking relieved to see him. This time it gestured toward the cabin door. "You want to come in?" Ethan asked, almost expecting the bear to nod. Taking a cautious step back, he held the door open. The bear entered with a surprising gentleness, its eyes never leaving Ethan's. As Ethan closed the door behind it, sealing them both in from the biting cold, he realized this was no ordinary night. What was this bear doing here, and what did it want? One thing was for sure, his quiet evening just got a lot more interesting. As the bear stepped cautiously across the threshold, its massive frame seemed to dwarf the small interior of Ethan's cabin. Snowflakes clung to its fur, melting and leaving damp patches on the wooden floor. Ethan watched, his heart pounding in his chest, as this wild creature made itself at home, shaking off the cold and surveying the room with an oddly measured calm. "All right, buddy, what's the plan here?" Ethan muttered to himself, half expecting the bear to understand him. The bear's presence in his living room was surreal, a stark contrast to the usually quiet nights spent in front of the fireplace. Ethan kept a safe distance, but couldn't help but feel a strange connection to this enormous animal that seemed to trust him. The bear, now seemingly more at ease, started to move deeper into the house. It paused occasionally, looking back to ensure Ethan was following. "You've got something to show me, huh?" Ethan said as he followed, his voice a mix of amusement and apprehension. The bear led him past the living room and down a narrow hallway towards the back of the cabin. As they approached the end of the hallway, the bear stopped and sniffed the air, its nose twitching. It then turned to face a door that Ethan rarely used, the entrance to the basement. With one more glance back at Ethan as if to say, "Trust me," the bear tapped at the door with a paw. Ethan, caught up in the absurdity and wonder of the moment, reached forward and turned the knob, pushing the door open. The basement was dimly lit by a single bulb that cast long shadows across the stacked boxes and old furniture. Ethan hadn't been down there in months. It was mostly used for storage, things he'd forgotten, or had no daily use for. The air was cool and musty, filled with the scent of damp and forgotten memories. The bear ambled down the stairs, its bulk making the wooden steps creak under its weight. Ethan followed hesitantly, unsure of what awaited them in the shadowy corners of the basement. He reached for the light switch and flipped it, flooding the room with light and revealing its dusty contents. Once at the bottom, the bear moved with surprising purpose. It headed straight for a pile of old rugs thrown in the corner. With a gentle nudge of its nose, it pushed the rugs aside, revealing a small, hidden trapdoor that Ethan had never noticed before. Stunned, Ethan knelt beside the bear, wiping away layers of dust to reveal a rusty ring handle. What in the world? He trailed off, his mind racing with possibilities. The bear sat back, its job seemingly done, watching him closely. Taking a deep breath, Ethan grasped the ring and pulled. The trapdoor creaked open, protesting with the screech of long unused hinges. A cooler draft of air rose from the dark opening, carrying with it a hint of earth and mold. Ethan fetched a flashlight from a shelf and shone it into the opening, revealing a narrow ladder descending into darkness. "What have you found here, buddy?" Ethan whispered, half to the bear, half to himself. The bear simply sat, its eyes reflecting a deep, unspoken knowledge as Ethan prepared to descend into the mystery that lay beneath his own home. What he found there would challenge everything he thought he knew about his quiet mountain retreat. With the flashlight gripped tightly in one hand, Ethan began his cautious descent down the ladder, each rung creaking under his weight as if protesting the disturbance of long-standing silence. Below, the air grew cooler and the smell of earth stronger, a stark contrast to the familiar warmth of his cabin above. As he reached the bottom, his boots met the solid ground of a dirt floor. The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing an underground room that seemed untouched by time. Ethan swept the light across the room, illuminating stone walls lined with shelves carved directly into the rock. These shelves were laden with an assortment of items, old books bound in leather, glass jars filled with unidentifiable substances, and ancient tools whose purposes were lost to time. In the center of the room stood a large, dust-covered table, atop which lay a map and several faded photographs. As Ethan approached the table, his curiosity piqued. He noticed the map was of the surrounding area, but dated decades earlier, marked with several X in red ink. The photographs were old and yellowed, showing the cabin and its surroundings, but in each one, the cabin looked slightly different, suggesting they were taken over a series of many years. Picking up one of the photos, Ethan wiped away the dust with his sleeve. It showed a man and a woman standing in front of the cabin, smiling, with the same bear standing beside them, looking remarkably similar to his unexpected guest. The bear in the photo sat dignified and calm, just as the bear that had led him here. A sense of historical connection washed over him, a realization that his cabin and perhaps the bear itself had stories buried far deeper than he had ever imagined. Turning back to the table, Ethan noticed a small, leather-bound journal tucked under the map. He opened it to find entries written in a neat, careful hand, detailing the life of the cabin's previous inhabitants. They spoke of the bear as a guardian of the property, a mystical creature that appeared in times of need or when the cabin and its secrets were threatened. As Ethan read, the pieces began to fall into place. The bear had not led him here by mere chance. It was fulfilling its role as protector, guiding him to discover the legacy and secrets that lay hidden beneath his home. The journal mentioned a pact made with the spirit of the bear, ensuring it would watch over the land and its owners as long as they preserved and respected its history. Feeling a mix of awe and responsibility, Ethan looked over at the bear, still waiting patiently at the base of the stairs. "You've been looking after this place all along, haven't you?" he said softly, the bear's eyes catching the flicker of the flashlight beam, a silent acknowledgement in their depths. Realizing the significance of what he had uncovered, Ethan knew his view of the cabin and the land it stood on was forever changed. The mundane reality of his life before this night seemed distant now, overshadowed by the magic and mystery enveloping his newfound guardian and home. As he stood there, surrounded by the echoes of the past, Ethan felt a profound connection to the land, the bear, and the stories that were now his to protect and continue. Ethan spent several more hours in the hidden room, poring over the journal and examining each artifact with a reverence he'd never known he possessed. Every item in the room told a part of the cabin's history, a history that now felt intimately his own. As he delved deeper, he learned about the original owners, a couple who had built the cabin as a haven, not just for themselves but for any being, human or otherwise, seeking sanctuary. The bear, according to the journal, was a spiritual entity bound to the land, its presence a blessing that ensured the safety and secrecy of this refuge. With each page turned, Ethan felt a growing sense of duty. It wasn't just about preserving a building. It was about honoring a legacy of guardianship and respect for nature. He thought about the bear upstairs, its silent plea for him to follow, and understood it was not just guiding him to the physical space of the hidden room, but also to a new understanding of his place in a much larger story. As dawn approached, the first light of morning began to seep into the basement through small crevices in the stone. Ethan carefully replaced the journal and the other items on the shelves and ascended the ladder back to the main level of the cabin. The bear was still there, its massive body a comforting presence in the hallway. "You knew all along, didn't you? About this place, about what I needed to find." Ethan spoke to the bear, who simply watched him with those deep, knowing eyes. It was as if the bear was confirming his thoughts, its gaze deep and reassuring. Feeling a mix of exhaustion and elation, Ethan opened the front door of the cabin. The storm had passed, and in its wake, a calm, crisp morning greeted him. The snow-covered landscape was peaceful, untouched, and radiant under the light of the rising sun. He looked at the bear, wondering if it would leave now that its task was completed. Instead of heading out into the wilderness, the bear turned and gave Ethan one final nod, a silent gesture of farewell and mutual respect. Then, with a look that seemed to convey both thankfulness and a reminder of his new responsibilities, the bear transformed. Before Ethan's astonished eyes, its form shimmered and shifted, not disappearing, but becoming part of the land itself, a guardian spirit now entrusting him with its legacy. The bear's presence faded into the morning light, leaving Ethan alone on the threshold of his cabin, the weight of his new role settling on his shoulders. He knew life would never be the same again. He was no longer just a man in a cabin in the woods. He was a guardian, a keeper of secrets, and a steward of a magical legacy that intertwined his life with the wild and mystical. Resolved and renewed, Ethan stepped back inside, ready to embrace his role fully. He would start by documenting everything he had learned, adding his own chapter to the journal in the hidden room. His life was now irrevocably linked to the cabin and its guardians, and he felt a profound sense of purpose and belonging. The cabin wasn't just his home, it was his charge, a sacred trust he was determined to keep, with the spirit of the bear watching over him, and the land they both now vowed to protect. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan found himself deeply engrossed in the responsibilities of his newfound role as the guardian of the cabin and its secrets. He started by meticulously organizing the hidden room, cataloging each artifact and document he found. He digitized the photographs and journal entries, preserving them for future reference, and ensuring that the history they encapsulated would not be lost to time or decay. Ethan also began to explore more about the spiritual and historical significance of the land around the cabin. He ventured into the local library, diving into archives and speaking with historians who could provide context and insights into the region's past. Through his research, he discovered that the area had been a sacred site for indigenous peoples long before settlers arrived, revered for its natural beauty and spiritual power. Inspired by these findings, Ethan decided to open parts of the cabin as a small museum, dedicated to the history of the land and its previous inhabitants. He set up displays with the artifacts from the hidden room, and panels that told the story of the bear, the couple who built the cabin, and the legacy of guardianship they had established. Word of the museum spread, attracting visitors who were interested in the history and mystique of the cabin. Ethan found joy in sharing the stories, feeling that each visitor who learned about the cabin's past was another protector of its legacy. He conducted tours, telling tales of the mystical bear and the secrets beneath the cabin, which fascinated children and adults alike. Amidst these changes, Ethan made sure to maintain the integrity and spirit of the cabin. He established conservation practices to protect the surrounding wilderness, ensuring that the land would remain undisturbed and true to its original purpose as a sanctuary. One crisp autumn evening, as Ethan was closing the museum for the day, he noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere. The air seemed charged, the earth beneath his feet more alive. He walked to the spot where the bear had transformed and paused, feeling a warm gust of wind brush against his cheek, a silent whisper of the wild. It was then he realized that his connection to the bear and the land was deeper than he had understood. It wasn't just about preserving the past, it was about being a part of a continuing story, a living tradition of guardianship and respect for nature. As he stood there, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace and purpose, knowing he was exactly where he was meant to be. The legacy of the cabin and its mystical protector was now his to carry forward, a task he accepted with honor and humility. Ethan knew that, just as the bear had once guided him, he too might one day pass on this sacred trust to another, ensuring that the spirit of the cabin and its guardian bear lived on, watched over by those who understood and cherished their duty to protect it. As autumn deepened into winter, the first snows began to blanket the cabin and its surroundings in soft white. Ethan continued his work with the same dedication, the cabin becoming a beacon of history and mystery in the community. His days were filled with the steady flow of visitors and ongoing research, but he always took time to walk the land, feeling the presence of the guardian spirit around him. One particularly crisp morning, with the first light of dawn breaking over the horizon, Ethan felt a tug in his heart to visit the hidden room. Descending the ladder into the now familiar space, he felt the air shift around him, thick with the energy of the earth below and the history it held. As he approached the table with the artifacts, he noticed something new, a small object partially obscured by the old map. It was a stone carving, small and intricate, depicting a bear surrounded by a circle of trees, a symbol, perhaps of the guardian spirit itself. Curious, Ethan examined the carving, wondering how he had missed it before. The craftsmanship was exquisite, the details finely honed by a skilled hand. As he held it, a warmth spread through his fingers, a palpable connection to the land and its history. It was as if the carving was imbued with the spirit of the bear, a tangible reminder of his duty and connection to this place. Ethan decided to add the carving to the museum display, placing it prominently with a description of its significance as a symbol of guardianship and connection to the natural world. Visitors were drawn to it, touched by the story and the energy it seemed to emanate. As winter passed into spring, the museum grew in popularity, becoming not just a local attraction but a place of pilgrimage for those drawn to the mystical and the spiritual. Ethan found himself hosting scholars, spiritual seekers, and conservationists, each bringing their own insights and adding to the rich tapestry of the cabin's legacy. One evening, as Ethan was closing up after a long day of tours and conversations, he paused by the front window, looking out at the land as the sun set, casting long shadows over the snow. He felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude and responsibility, aware that he was not just a carer of artifacts and stories, but a steward of a much larger story that connected the past, present, and future. In this moment of reflection, Ethan realized that his life had taken a path he could never have anticipated the day the bear first led him to his cabin door. He had found his purpose, woven into the fabric of this magical place. He knew that as long as he was there, he would continue to uphold the values of guardianship and respect for the natural world, teaching others to do the same. Ethan's connection to the cabin and the guardian spirit of the bear had changed him, not just as a keeper of history, but as a participant in an ongoing dialogue between humanity and nature. He understood now, exactly where he was meant to be, playing his part in a story that was as old as the land itself, and as enduring as the spirit that protected it.